In the grim darkness of the far future, where the galaxy is an unending cauldron of war, one threat stands apart, alien, unknowable, and utterly merciless. The Tyranids, a species so profoundly alien that even the most ancient races of the galaxy struggle to comprehend their true nature, have swept across the stars like an all-consuming tide. They are a scourge from beyond the known galaxy, a biological force so vast and overwhelming that it defies comprehension. But where do they come from? What drives this ravenous swarm, and what is their ultimate goal? To understand the Tyranids is to confront the limits of knowledge itself. These creatures, unlike the myriad xeno-species inhabiting the galaxy, are not native to the Milky Way. They are intruders, a predator that descends from the void between galaxies, devouring everything in its path. Planets, ecosystems, and even entire civilizations have vanished beneath the Tyranids' relentless hunger. Yet, as terrifying as their arrival has been, their true origin remains shrouded in mystery. Before diving into their nature and purpose, it is essential to grasp the scale of their threat. The Tyranids are not a mere species. They are a bioengineered force of evolution, unified by a singular hive mind that coordinates their every action. They do not conquer or negotiate, they consume. Unlike the familiar horrors of chaos or the ambitions of the Imperium, the Tyranids have no ideology, no morality, and no agenda beyond survival through consumption. They are the galaxy's antithesis, a force of unmaking that reduces all to biomass to fuel their endless advance. The scope of their origin story requires us to confront some of the deepest enigmas in Warhammer 40,000. How can a race so profoundly alien exist? Who, or what, created them, if indeed they were created? Why did they leave the void between galaxies and venture into the Milky Way? And perhaps the most pressing question of all, is their invasion merely the beginning of a far greater threat? As the story unfolds, we will trace the faint, scattered breadcrumbs that hint at their beginnings. This tale is not merely one of biological terror, but also of ancient secrets and cosmic dread. To comprehend the Tyranids, we must delve into the unknown corners of the galaxy and beyond. Only then can we begin to answer the question that haunts the Imperium, the Eldar, and all other sentient life in the galaxy. What is the origin of the Tyranids? The galaxy of Warhammer 40,000 is teeming with diverse factions and entities, each playing their part in the grand tapestry of endless war. When it comes to the Tyranids, the key players are both the alien swarm itself and those who interact with it, either as prey, adversaries, or observers. Each brings a unique perspective and role in understanding the significance and impact of this invasive species. First and foremost is the hive mind, the collective consciousness that unifies the Tyranid species. This Gestalt entity serves as the ultimate overseer of the swarm, guiding countless trillions of organisms across the galaxy with perfect coordination. It is through the hive mind's will that the Tyranids function as one organism, each creature acting as a mere cell in a greater, incomprehensible whole. While the hive mind itself remains enigmatic, it is central to every aspect of the Tyranid threat, defining their nature and the extent of their reach. The Tyranid bioforms are the physical manifestation of this hive intelligence, ranging from minuscule creatures to towering monstrosities. These bioforms are not individual beings in the conventional sense, but are instead extensions of the hive mind's will, designed and adapted for specific tasks. From the scuttling termagants to the monstrous carnifexes, every Tyranid organism serves a purpose in the relentless drive to consume. These creatures encompass a dizzying variety of forms, each perfectly suited to its role, whether that be direct combat, reconnaissance, or the harvesting of biomass. In addition to their biological forms, the hive fleets represent the Tyranids on a galactic scale. These vast collections of bioships traverse the void, serving as both the armies and the ecosystems of the swarm. Each hive fleet is a self-contained system, capable of deploying billions of creatures while simultaneously replenishing itself by consuming entire worlds. These fleets, such as Leviathan, Kraken, and Behemoth, are the primary vehicles of Tyranid invasions, each with its own characteristics and adaptations. Opposing the Tyranids are various factions within the Milky Way galaxy. Chief among them is the Imperium of Man, the sprawling human empire that dominates much of the galaxy. The Imperium's response to the Tyranid threat is primarily coordinated by the Astra Militarum, the Adeptus Astartes, and the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition. These institutions bring a combination of military might, investigative expertise, and strategic planning to the struggle against the Swarm. The Imperium's scale and resources make it a formidable opponent, but even its vast armies have often been overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and adaptability of the Tyranids. The ancient Eldar, a race known for their psychic abilities and deep understanding of the galaxy's history, also play a critical role in the struggle against the Tyranids. With their reliance on speed and precision, the Eldar aim to outmaneuver the swarms and minimize losses, often working to safeguard key locations or relics from destruction. Their prescient farseers warn of the Hive Fleet's approach, though even their foresight struggles to predict the full scope of the Tyranid threat. Among the other Xenos races, the Orcs, Necrons, and Tau each present a unique response to the Tyranids. The Orcs see the Tyranids as a challenge to their love of war, engaging them in massive, chaotic battles. The Necrons, with their ancient technology and disdain for organic life, approach the Tyranids as a dangerous anomaly to be contained or eradicated. Meanwhile, the Tau, known for their tactical innovation, adapt their strategies to counter the Hive Fleets as they fight to protect their burgeoning empire. Finally, various independent and unaligned entities have found themselves drawn into the conflict. Rogue traders, charting the unexplored edges of the galaxy, have often been the first to encounter the Tyranids, their warnings sometimes arriving too late. Smaller, isolated human or alien colonies frequently face the Tyranids alone, their desperate resistance often serving as the first line of defense before larger forces can intervene. Even the shadowy forces of chaos, though less directly involved, cannot ignore the ramifications of the Tyranid invasion as it threatens the balance of power within the galaxy. Together, these participants define the struggle against the Tyranids. Each plays a role, whether as hunter, prey, or observer, and each contributes to the larger narrative of a galaxy fighting for survival against an enemy that cannot be reasoned with, only resisted. As the Hive Fleets continue their advance, the relationships and rivalries between these factions will shape the fate of countless worlds. Before the Tyranids emerged as a galactic threat, the seeds of their origin were sown in a time and place far removed from the familiar reaches of the Milky Way. Their story begins not in the known galaxy, but in the vast, unfathomable depths of intergalactic space, where isolation, scarcity, and predation shaped the conditions that would give rise to their existence. The conditions leading to their genesis are unlike those that created most other known life forms, presenting a chilling glimpse into the harsh realities of survival in the void. In the spaces between galaxies, resources are extraordinarily scarce. These dark regions are desolate, devoid of the dense star fields, planetary systems, and nebulae that sustain life in the Milky Way. Any life form that could arise in such an environment would need to evolve under the harshest pressures of natural selection, favoring adaptability, efficiency, and the relentless drive to consume. It is within these unforgiving conditions that the protoforms of the Tyranids likely emerged, born of necessity to harvest energy and matter from the sparse environments they inhabited. The timeline of the Tyranids' evolution is impossible to pinpoint, given their origins outside the Milky Way. However, their emergence was likely shaped by ancient forces that remain as mysterious as the Tyranids themselves. Some theories suggest the Tyranids may have been created or guided by an unknown intelligence, potentially as a weapon, experiment, or desperate survival mechanism. Alternatively, they could represent a natural response to the conditions of intergalactic space, their biology and behavior shaped entirely by the environment from which they arose. One of the most plausible triggers for the Tyranids' development lies in the evolutionary pressure of competition. In the void, any nascent species would face immediate and extreme challenges to survival, competing fiercely for the scarce resources available. The Tyranids' defining trait, their ability to rapidly adapt and evolve, likely began as a response to this competition. Over countless eons, this ability became so advanced that it transcended ordinary biological processes, manifesting as the collective intelligence of the hive mind and the endless adaptability of the swarm. Another factor that may have contributed to their rise is the presence of energy fields or phenomena in intergalactic space. These could have influenced their early development, granting the Tyranids unique abilities to manipulate or respond to the bioenergies of living organisms. Such energies might explain the hive mind's immense psychic presence, which allows it to coordinate trillions of organisms as a single entity. Whether this psychic capacity is a product of natural evolution or an external influence remains one of the great mysteries surrounding the Tyranids. The decision to leave their place of origin and enter the Milky Way was likely not a random occurrence. The Tyranids' consumption-driven biology suggests they exhausted the resources of their native environment, necessitating their expansion into new territories. This is not a phenomenon unique to the Tyranids. Ecological collapse or resource scarcity has driven countless species to migrate or expand into new regions throughout the history of life. However, for the Tyranids, this process operates on a scale and with a finality that far surpasses anything seen in the Milky Way. As the Tyranids ventured into the galactic void, their nature as a predatory force solidified. Unlike species that evolve to coexist or adapt within an ecosystem, the Tyranids developed as a purely parasitic force, consuming entire biospheres and leaving nothing behind. This all-consuming hunger may have been a necessary adaptation for survival in their original environment, but in the context of the Milky Way, it represents an existential threat to all other forms of life. The exact circumstances of their first contact with the Milky Way are unknown, but their arrival coincided with a galaxy already embroiled in conflict and chaos. Ancient races like the Eldar and Necrons, as well as the burgeoning human Imperium, were unaware of the shadow creeping closer. The Tyranids' incursion began subtly, with scouting organisms and small bioships probing the outer edges of the galaxy. These early forays marked the beginning of an invasion unlike any the galaxy had ever faced, a predatory force driven not by ideology or ambition, but by the sheer imperative of survival and consumption. In many ways, the Tyranids embody a cosmic inevitability. Their origin and evolution are not tied to specific events or individuals, but to the harsh realities of existence in an uncaring universe. They are a force of nature, the product of an environment that demanded total adaptation and dominance. Understanding their beginnings requires not only looking at the conditions that shaped them, but also recognizing the deeper implications, that in the void, survival often comes at the expense of everything else. The emergence of the Tyranids and their eventual arrival in the Milky Way unfolded over an unfathomably long timeline, marked by distinct and escalating phases. Each phase demonstrates their relentless drive for survival, adaptation, and expansion, culminating in the unprecedented threat they now pose to the galaxy. These stages reveal not only the methods by which the Tyranids evolved, but also the sheer inevitability of their approach. The earliest phase of the Tyranids' existence was defined by survival in a hostile environment. In the desolation of intergalactic space, they began as simple organisms, their evolutionary trajectory shaped by the scarcity of resources and competition for survival. This stage likely spanned millions, if not billions, of years as they refined their ability to adapt, consume, and replicate. During this time, their key traits, genetic manipulation, rapid evolution, and the ability to unify under a singular consciousness, were honed to perfection. The second phase marked their transition from isolated survival to organized expansion. As their hive mind grew in complexity, the Tyranids began to function as a collective organism, coordinating their efforts to harvest resources on a massive scale. This phase may have seen the development of their biofleets, allowing them to travel between isolated pockets of matter in the void. Each encounter with new prey likely enhanced their genetic repertoire as they absorbed and integrated advantageous traits from other life forms into their own biomass. This period was defined by experimentation and refinement as the Tyranids perfected their biological processes for maximum efficiency. Eventually, the Tyranids entered a phase of consolidation and dominance in their original environment. With their adaptive capabilities fully developed, they would have overwhelmed any remaining competition, reducing their native ecosystem to a state of total consumption. This marked a turning point in their evolution as they transitioned from being shaped by their environment to becoming the dominant force within it. With no remaining resources to sustain them, their focus shifted outward, beyond the edges of their original domain. The next major phase was their migration into intergalactic space, a journey that would define their existence as a nomadic predator. Leaving their original galaxy, or possibly multiple galaxies, the Tyranids began a slow but methodical expansion into the void. This phase was not one of conquest but of survival, as they sought out new sources of biomass to sustain their ever-growing hive fleets. These journeys may have taken millennia, as the Tyranids traversed the vast emptiness between galaxies, relying on their bioship's ability to sustain themselves through recycling and hibernation. As they approached the Milky Way, the Tyranids began the final phase of their journey, reconnaissance and preparation. The hive mind likely sent forward scouts and vanguard organisms, probing the galaxy's edges for signs of life and resources. These initial incursions were subtle, often going unnoticed by the galaxy's inhabitants. Small bioships carrying reconnaissance organisms would silently observe, analyze, and adapt to the new environment. These scouts played a crucial role in the Tyranid strategy, gathering the data necessary to tailor their future invasions to the unique conditions of the Milky Way. The Tyranids' first significant contact with the Milky Way occurred on its outer edges, where isolated systems fell to their predation. These early encounters were often misinterpreted as isolated Xenos threats, with their true nature remaining hidden. It was only with the arrival of larger hive fleets, such as Behemoth, that the galaxy began to comprehend the scale and intent of the Tyranid invasion. This marked the beginning of their direct interaction with the galaxy's inhabitants as their presence became impossible to ignore. Each stage of the Tyranids' development was driven by necessity and executed with ruthless efficiency. From their humble beginnings in the void to their status as one of the galaxy's greatest threats, their story is one of relentless adaptation and expansion. Their methods are not dictated by emotion or ideology, but by an unyielding biological imperative. This progression reflects the core essence of the Tyranids, an unstoppable force born of scarcity and perfected through consumption, now poised to consume the galaxy in its entirety. The defining moment in the origin of the Tyranids was their decision, or instinctual necessity, to leave the desolation of their original environment and seek sustenance beyond the borders of their home galaxy. This shift marked the transformation of the Tyranids from a localized survival phenomenon into an intergalactic force of unparalleled destruction. This was not a decision in the conventional sense, as the Tyranids do not operate on the basis of conscious deliberation, but rather a biological imperative driven by their unique evolutionary design. The critical juncture arose when the resources in their original galaxy or region of existence were exhausted. The Tyranids, having perfected their method of consuming entire biospheres, eventually reached a point where there was nothing left to sustain their hive fleets. This was likely an inevitable outcome of their relentless consumption, an inescapable result of their design to convert all matter into biomass. The void between galaxies loomed as their only remaining path forward. What makes this moment pivotal is that it was not a simple migration. It was an unprecedented expansion into a realm far beyond the Tyranids' established range, necessitating adaptations on a scale never before required. Traversing the void was no small feat. It demanded the evolution of their bioships into self-sustaining ecosystems capable of enduring millennia in the lightless, resource-scarce expanse. These ships became not just transport vessels, but entire biomes, housing dormant organisms and recycling every ounce of available biomass to ensure survival. This stage also marked the genesis of the Tyranids' probing and reconnaissance tactics. The decision to send vanguard organisms into new territories ahead of their main fleets was a turning point in their strategic evolution. These organisms, designed to scout, adapt, and test the viability of new environments, were key to ensuring the survival of the hive fleets as they ventured into the unknown. It was during this phase that the Tyranids developed the capability to gather genetic material from encountered life forms and use it to evolve rapidly, tailoring their biological systems to the challenges of their new frontier. The move into intergalactic space also saw the expansion of the hive mind's role. No longer confined to a single galaxy, the hive mind became a transgalactic entity, its influence stretching across incomprehensible distances. This required a level of coordination and psychic dominance that surpassed anything the Tyranids had previously achieved. The hive mind adapted to exert control over its organisms across vast distances, ensuring that even in the absence of direct resources or immediate threats, the swarm remained cohesive and unified. What made this event more than just a biological inevitability was its scale and implications. The Tyranids were no longer a species confined to their original conditions. They had become a universal force of consumption. The act of leaving their galaxies signaled their transition from a localized threat to a cosmic one. Their very existence now predicated on the consumption of all life wherever it could be found. The decision to move beyond their original boundaries also set the stage for the Tyranids' eventual arrival in the Milky Way. The choices made during this pivotal moment, whether to evolve bioships capable of sustaining the journey, to develop the hive mind's transgalactic reach, or to initiate their reconnaissance strategies, shaped every aspect of their future encounters. It was the moment when the Tyranids' nature as a predatory force became fully realized, not as a result of external pressures, but as an intrinsic part of their design. This act of expansion also marked a fundamental change in the balance of the cosmos. No longer confined to their origin, the Tyranids became a roaming catastrophe, their survival intrinsically linked to the destruction of everything in their path. This shift irrevocably altered the trajectory of their existence and brought them into a galaxy unprepared for the scale of their hunger. The moment when the Tyranids first breached the void was the catalyst for everything that followed. It was a transition from survival to conquest, from adaptation to domination. This event transformed them into a force that the Milky Way, and any other galaxy they might encounter, would have to reckon with, a shadow on the horizon that heralded not just death, but total annihilation. The emergence of the Tyranids and their subsequent incursion into the Milky Way had profound and far-reaching consequences for the galaxy. Their presence reshaped not only the strategies and priorities of its inhabitants, but also introduced a new existential threat that transcended the political, ideological, and even metaphysical conflicts that had defined the galaxy's history. The Tyranids represented a force fundamentally unlike anything encountered before, a predator driven solely by survival and consumption, without any concern for diplomacy, alliances, or even recognition of its adversaries as sentient beings. One of the most immediate impacts was the reallocation of military and strategic resources by the factions of the galaxy. The Imperium of Man, which had long been entrenched in wars of attrition against Chaos, Orcs, and various Xenos species, was forced to divert significant forces to counter the Tyranids. Entire segments of the Astra Militarum and Space Marine chapters were reassigned to regions under threat from hive fleets, leading to weakened defenses in other critical areas. This redistribution of forces created vulnerabilities across the Imperium, exposing it to increased incursions from other enemies who sought to exploit the situation. The psychic presence of the hive mind also introduced a disruptive influence across the galaxy. The overwhelming psychic signal emitted by the Tyranids drowned out the warp, cutting off astropathic communication and navigation in areas under their influence. This phenomenon, known as the shadow in the warp, rendered entire star systems isolated and defenseless, unable to call for reinforcements or evacuate their populations. The shadow in the warp not only hindered military coordination, but also instilled widespread panic, as worlds under its influence were plunged into silence and despair. The Tyranids' method of war fundamentally changed the way galactic factions approached conflict. Unlike most adversaries, the Tyranids did not leave survivors or retreat when faced with overwhelming resistance. Every encounter with the Tyranids ended in either the complete destruction of the swarm or the total consumption of the planet. This totality forced new tactical considerations, as traditional methods of containment, attrition, or negotiation proved entirely ineffective. Planets targeted by hive fleets often adopted a scorched earth strategy, destroying their own resources and infrastructure to deny the Tyranid sustenance, even at the cost of their own survival. The biological diversity and adaptability of the Tyranids also introduced an unprecedented challenge to the galaxy's defenders. Each hive fleet was capable of evolving new bioforms specifically tailored to counter the strengths and exploit the weaknesses of its enemies. This constant adaptation rendered static defenses and conventional tactics obsolete, forcing factions to innovate rapidly or face annihilation. The arms race between the Tyranids and their opponents became a defining feature of the conflicts that followed their arrival, driving technological and strategic advancements in a desperate bid for survival. The ripple effects of the Tyranid invasion extended beyond the battlefield. The ecological devastation left in their wake had long-term consequences for the galaxy's infrastructure and economies. Planets consumed by the Tyranids became barren husks, incapable of supporting life or contributing resources to their respective factions. This loss of habitable worlds and vital resources placed immense strain on already overburdened systems, particularly within the Imperium, where overpopulation and resource scarcity were already critical issues. The psychological impact of the Tyranid threat was equally profound. The sheer alien nature of the hive fleets and their complete disregard for the individuality of their prey instilled a deep existential dread in the galaxy's inhabitants. The realization that the Tyranids could not be reasoned with or deterred fundamentally altered how the galaxy perceived the concept of war. Against the backdrop of the Tyranid invasion, the petty rivalries and ideological struggles that had once consumed entire civilizations seemed trivial by comparison. For Xenos factions such as the Eldar and Tau, the Tyranids forced a reconsideration of their roles and priorities in the galaxy. The Eldar, who had always viewed themselves as stewards of the galaxy's ancient secrets, found their foresight and planning challenged by the unpredictable and adaptive nature of the Tyranids. The Tau, with their emphasis on technological progress and coalition building, were confronted with an enemy that cared nothing for diplomacy or innovation. Even the Orcs, typically uninterested in anything beyond the joy of battle, found themselves overwhelmed by the Tyranids' relentless advance. Perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of the Tyranid emergence was the existential question they posed to the galaxy's inhabitants. The Tyranids were not bound by the morality, goals, or limitations that defined other factions. Their sole purpose was to consume and survive, and their relentless hunger suggested that even the vast resources of the Milky Way would eventually be insufficient to sustain them. This raised a chilling possibility that the Tyranids represented not just an external threat, but a mirror of the galaxy's own future, where survival at all costs became the only imperative. The Tyranid invasion reshaped the galaxy in ways that extended far beyond the immediate destruction they wrought. Their arrival forced the galaxy's factions to confront the limits of their own strategies, resources, and understanding. In a universe defined by conflict and ambition, the Tyranids introduced a new paradigm, one where the struggle for existence overshadowed all other considerations. Their impact continues to ripple across the galaxy, a stark reminder that the greatest threats often come from the most unexpected places. The origin of the Tyranids is one of the most enigmatic and hotly debated mysteries in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. What makes this question particularly fascinating is the unique biological and strategic characteristics of the Tyranids that suggest they may not have arisen purely through natural evolution. Instead, their nature hints at the possibility of an external force, whether ancient or entirely alien, having shaped or guided their development. This mystery opens up avenues for speculation and theory crafting that continue to captivate the Warhammer community. A central point of intrigue lies in the Tyranids' extraordinary genetic adaptability. Their ability to consume the DNA of other organisms and rapidly evolve specific traits tailored to their environment seems almost too perfect to be a product of chance. This precision suggests a level of design that surpasses natural selection, leading many to theorize that the Tyranids were artificially created or manipulated. Theories abound regarding the potential creators of the Tyranids, ranging from ancient and forgotten galactic civilizations to entities from outside the known universe entirely. Another unique aspect of their origin is the hive mind itself, which is unlike any other psychic phenomenon in the galaxy. The hive mind operates as a singular consciousness, coordinating trillions of organisms with a level of precision that defies understanding. Its psychic presence is overwhelming, capable of disrupting warp travel and communications, yet it shows no signs of individual personality or goals beyond survival and consumption. This has led some to speculate that the hive mind may not be a natural evolutionary development, but rather a construct or even a weapon designed for a specific purpose. One of the most debated topics in the fan community is whether the Tyranids' arrival in the Milky Way was accidental or deliberate. The galaxy's abundant resources make it a logical target for a species driven by consumption, but some have suggested that the Tyranids were drawn here by something specific. Some theories propose that the psychic activity of the Milky Way, particularly the presence of the Chaos Gods and the Astronomicon, acted as a beacon, attracting the hive fleets across the void. Others believe the Tyranids may have been fleeing from an even greater threat in their own galaxy or beyond, raising the chilling possibility that there is something even more terrifying than the Tyranids lurking in the darkness. The Tyranids' interaction with other ancient threats in the galaxy also adds a layer of complexity to their origin. The Necrons and their mastery of the material realm, combined with their disdain for organic life, have led some to speculate that they might have encountered the Tyranids in the distant past, or even played a role in their development. Similarly, the Old Ones, often theorized to be the architects of life in the galaxy, could have had a hand in shaping the Tyranids, either as a failed experiment or a desperate weapon against their ancient enemies. The Tyranids' bioships, which serve as their fleets and mobile ecosystems, are another fascinating element linked to their origin. These vessels are not constructed in the traditional sense, but are instead grown, functioning as living organisms. Each bioship is capable of sustaining itself for millennia, recycling its resources with unparalleled efficiency. This level of bioengineering raises the question of whether the Tyranids' creators, if they exist, had access to technologies far beyond anything known in the galaxy today. Alternatively, if the Tyranids did develop independently, it suggests that their evolution followed a path entirely different from any other life form. Theories about their origin also intersect with questions about their ultimate purpose. While the Tyranids appear to be driven purely by the need to consume and survive, some speculate that there may be a deeper motive behind their actions. One hypothesis suggests that the Tyranids are part of a larger ecological cycle on a cosmic scale, acting as a form of universal entropy designed to reset galaxies that have reached a point of stagnation or imbalance. Another theory posits that the Tyranids may be seeking something specific, such as a particular form of energy or a missing component of their own evolution. The lack of concrete evidence about their origin allows for nearly limitless speculation, and this ambiguity is a key part of what makes the Tyranids such a compelling faction. Fans often debate whether the Tyranids are a natural force of destruction, a relic of ancient galactic conflicts, or a weapon unleashed by forces unknown. Each of these possibilities carries its own implications, not only for the Tyranids themselves, but for the galaxy as a whole. Ultimately, the Tyranids' origin is a question that may never be fully answered, and perhaps that is by design. Their existence as an unknowable alien force adds to the atmosphere of dread and mystery that defines the Warhammer 40,000 universe. By leaving this question open-ended, the lore invites fans to explore and theorize, ensuring that the Tyranids remain one of the most discussed and enigmatic factions in the galaxy. Their origin is not merely a question of where they came from, but also of what they represent, an ultimate unrelenting predator that challenges the very fabric of existence. The Tyranids are not defined by individual personalities in the traditional sense, as they lack individuality or autonomy outside the collective will of the hive mind. However, within their ranks exist specialized bioforms of such magnitude and significance that they stand as the closest equivalent to leaders or prominent figures in their relentless swarm. These entities are extensions of the hive mind's overarching will, designed with unique traits and purposes that allow them to play critical roles in the Tyranid ecosystem. Their presence directly shapes the strategies, adaptability, and overall success of the Tyranid invasion, acting as vital components of the hive mind's grand design. One of the most infamous and enigmatic Tyranid bioforms is the Swarm Lord. Unlike other Tyranid leaders, which are merely powerful extensions of the hive mind, the Swarm Lord is a recurring and highly evolved manifestation, summoned by the hive mind in times of great need. It is not a single being, but a concept encoded within the Tyranid genetic matrix, reborn whenever the swarm requires a master strategist and unparalleled battlefield presence. The Swarm Lord's tactical genius sets it apart from other bioforms. It is capable of learning and adapting to its enemies' strategies with frightening speed, often outmaneuvering even the most seasoned commanders. Its intelligence is matched by its physical prowess, as it wields unique bone sabers and possesses unparalleled combat skills. However, the Swarm Lord is not without its limitations. While it excels in strategy and combat, it relies entirely on the hive mind for its existence and purpose. If severed from the hive mind's influence, its capabilities would diminish, and it would cease to function as an independent force. This dependence reflects the inherent weakness of all Tyranid bioforms, their total reliance on the collective will that binds them together. The Swarm Lord's presence often signals the escalation of a conflict, as the hive mind commits significant resources to ensure its deployment, making it a figure of both power and vulnerability within the Tyranid hierarchy. Another critical figure in the Tyranid ranks is the Norn Queen, a bioform of immense significance that serves as the genetic architect of the hive fleets. Norn Queens are the creators of the countless Tyranid bioforms, shaping the genetic material absorbed from consumed worlds into new, specialized creatures. They act as the primary conduits through which the hive mind's will is translated into physical form, ensuring that the swarm remains adaptable and efficient. Norn Queens are rarely encountered in battle, as they reside deep within the hive ships, protected by layers of defenses and lesser bioforms. Their strength lies in their unparalleled ability to manipulate genetics, ensuring that the Tyranids can evolve to overcome any challenge. However, their physical vulnerability is a significant weakness. If a Norn Queen is destroyed, it represents a severe blow to the hive fleet's ability to adapt and replenish its forces. This vulnerability makes them a prime target for those seeking to disrupt the Tyranid invasion, though reaching them is a near impossible task due to the sheer number of defenses between them and their enemies. Another bioform of note is the Brood Lord, a psychic predator and apex hunter within the Tyranid swarm. The Brood Lord is a terrifyingly intelligent creature, capable of leading smaller Tyranid forces in infiltration and guerrilla warfare. It serves as both a commander and a beacon for the hive mind, extending its influence into areas where direct control might otherwise be limited. The Broodlord is also an embodiment of the Tyranids' parasitic nature, often serving as the harbinger of larger invasions. It uses its psychic abilities to dominate and subjugate other creatures, creating a foothold for the swarm. The Broodlord's strengths lie in its cunning and psychic power, allowing it to outthink and outmaneuver its prey. However, its reliance on smaller, stealth-based tactics limits its effectiveness in large-scale conflicts. Its role is vital during the initial stages of an invasion, but as the swarm grows in strength, the Broodlord's importance diminishes, overshadowed by the larger and more destructive elements of the Hive fleet. Tyranid warriors, while not individual figures, represent the backbone of the swarm's leadership structure. These creatures are synapse bioforms, acting as relay points for the hive mind's control over lesser Tyranids. They are versatile and highly adaptable, capable of fulfilling a variety of roles, from direct combat to tactical oversight. Tyranid warriors are crucial in maintaining the cohesion of the swarm, especially in the absence of more prominent synapse creatures. Their strength lies in their versatility and resilience, but they are not without weaknesses. Without their synapse control, the lesser Tyranids under their command may descend into disorganized chaos, becoming significantly less effective. This reliance on synapse creatures like the Tyranid warriors is a key vulnerability that opponents often seek to exploit. Lastly, there are the Hive Tyrants, towering bioforms that serve as the Tyranid swarm's generals and conduits for the hive mind's will. Hive Tyrants are among the most adaptable and dangerous Tyranid organisms, capable of wielding devastating weaponry, leading vast swarms, and even using powerful psychic abilities. Each Hive Tyrant is uniquely tailored to its environment and the needs of its hive fleet, making them unpredictable and highly effective on the battlefield. However, like the Swarm Lord and other synapse bioforms, Hive Tyrants are dependent on the hive mind's influence. While they are individually powerful, their true strength lies in their ability to coordinate and amplify the efforts of the swarm. If isolated or overwhelmed, they can be brought down, dealing a significant blow to the cohesion of the Tyranid forces. These figures, each a unique expression of the hive mind's will, embody the strengths and weaknesses of the Tyranids as a whole. They are not independent individuals, but tools designed for specific purposes, and their effectiveness depends entirely on their ability to fulfill their roles within the greater swarm. Through them, the Tyranids achieve their terrifying potential, adapting and evolving to consume everything in their path. Their existence serves as a reminder of the hive mind's singular focus, the relentless drive to consume and survive, no matter the cost. The origin of the Tyranids is one of the most enduring mysteries in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, sparking numerous theories and debates within the community. These questions delve into not only how the Tyranids came into existence, but also why they have chosen the Milky Way as their target, and what this implies about the larger universe beyond the galaxy's borders. Each theory attempts to piece together fragments of lore and speculation to uncover the true genesis of this terrifying and alien menace. One of the most prominent theories is that the Tyranids were artificially created, potentially as a weapon. The precision and purpose behind their evolution, the unifying power of the hive mind, and the sheer efficiency of their bioforms suggest design rather than chance. This raises the question of who or what might have created them. Some theorists point to the possibility of an ancient civilization, perhaps long extinct, that engineered the Tyranids as a tool to fight a now-forgotten enemy. This civilization may have unleashed the Tyranids as a last resort, only to lose control of their creation, leading to the swarm's current path of relentless consumption. A variation of this theory suggests that the Tyranids are not simply a weapon, but an experiment in evolution. Their unparalleled ability to adapt to any environment and their capacity to assimilate genetic material from other species might have been designed to test the limits of biological potential. If this is the case, the Tyranids may be the product of an experiment gone awry, one that has spiraled out of control as they outgrew their creators and began spreading across the cosmos in search of new genetic material to assimilate. Another intriguing theory involves the idea that the Tyranids are not native to any galaxy, but instead originate from a higher dimensional plane or an entirely different universal system. Their existence in the Milky Way could represent a form of invasive species migration on a cosmic scale, driven by factors incomprehensible to the inhabitants of the galaxy. This perspective raises questions about the conditions of their origin. What kind of environment could produce such creatures, and what forces might have driven them to abandon their original domain? The possibility that the Tyranids are fleeing from an even greater threat adds another layer of speculation. Some suggest that their migration into the Milky Way is not an act of predation, but one of desperation. If their home galaxy, or galaxies, was consumed or rendered uninhabitable by another force, the Tyranids may have been forced to move outward in search of survival. This raises chilling implications about what kind of entity or event could displace a species as overwhelmingly destructive as the Tyranids. The thought that they might represent refugees from a conflict or catastrophe of unimaginable scale paints a picture of a universe far more dangerous and complex than the Milky Way's inhabitants currently understand. The nature of the hive mind itself remains an unresolved question central to the Tyranids' origin. Is it a product of biological evolution, or is it something more? Some argue that the hive mind could be a manifestation of an external entity, perhaps a form of collective psychic consciousness that exists independently of the Tyranids' physical forms. This would imply that the swarms are not the origin of the hive mind, but merely its tools or vessels, raising the possibility that the true mastermind behind the Tyranids has yet to reveal itself. Others theorize that the Tyranids may have been drawn to the Milky Way by the unique properties of the galaxy itself. The Milky Way is rich in psychic energy, as evidenced by the presence of the warp and the astronomicon. It is possible that the psychic emanations of the galaxy acted as a beacon, luring the Tyranids across the intergalactic void. This theory suggests a natural, albeit catastrophic, convergence of forces rather than an intentional invasion, with the Tyranids simply following the most viable path for their survival. The possibility of an ancient connection between the Tyranids and other galactic powers also fuels speculation. Could the Necrons, with their mastery of the material realm, have encountered or even influenced the Tyranids in some distant past? Similarly, some wonder if the Old Ones, often credited with seeding life across the galaxy, might have had a hand in creating or encountering the Tyranids in their early stages. These connections remain tantalizingly unclear, offering hints of a broader history that ties the Tyranids to the larger narrative of the galaxy. Finally, there are those who question whether the Tyranids even have a singular point of origin. Their highly adaptable nature and the sheer scale of their presence suggest the possibility that they are not a single species, but a conglomerate of multiple bioforms evolved or assimilated across countless galaxies. If this is true, the Tyranids might not have an origin in the traditional sense, but instead represent an evolutionary phenomenon that has repeated itself across time and space, with the hive mind emerging as a unifying force to guide this collective mass. The unanswered questions surrounding the Tyranids' origin continue to captivate and terrify in equal measure. Each theory offers a different lens through which to view their presence, whether as an unstoppable natural force, the product of deliberate creation, or a symptom of a much larger cosmic struggle. What remains certain is that the truth of their origin, if it is ever uncovered, will have profound implications for the galaxy and its understanding of the universe at large. The long-term consequences of the Tyranids' existence and origin ripple across the galaxy, potentially altering its trajectory in profound and far-reaching ways. Whether through their direct actions or the reactions they provoke from other factions, the Tyranids stand as a catalyst for change in a universe already teetering on the edge of collapse. These changes could shape the future in both catastrophic and transformative ways, forcing the galaxy to confront existential questions about survival, adaptation, and the limits of its own endurance. One of the most immediate long-term consequences of the Tyranids' presence is the potential collapse of ecosystems and habitable worlds. Their method of consuming every scrap of biomass leaves nothing behind, turning once thriving planets into barren husks. Over centuries or millennia, this could result in the gradual depopulation of significant galactic regions. The loss of these resources would cripple many factions, particularly those reliant on constant expansion and exploitation to sustain their populations. The Imperium, already stretched to its limits, would face the possibility of economic and logistical implosion as entire sectors are rendered uninhabitable. This ecological devastation also raises a grim possibility. The galaxy may eventually be stripped of its capacity to support life entirely. If the Tyranids are not stopped, their consumption could trigger a cascading collapse of interconnected ecosystems, leaving no safe haven for organic life. In this scenario, the galaxy's surviving inhabitants may be forced to flee to uncharted regions, initiating a desperate and potentially unsustainable exodus into the unknown. Such an outcome would fundamentally reshape the galaxy, turning once dominant civilizations into wandering remnants, struggling to escape the shadow of annihilation. On a larger scale, the Tyranids' presence could fundamentally alter the balance of power among the galaxy's factions. For the Imperium, Eldar, Tau, and other species, the Tyranids represent a threat so vast and unrelenting that it forces reconsideration of long-standing rivalries. The need to combat a common enemy may drive temporary alliances or even lead to unprecedented cooperation between sworn enemies. While this unity could create a short-term reprieve, it also has the potential to destabilize traditional power structures and ideologies, forcing factions to adapt to new realities or risk irrelevance in the face of the Tyranid menace. The relentless adaptability of the Tyranids also raises questions about how other factions might respond. The arms race provoked by their evolutionary capabilities could spur technological and strategic advancements at an accelerated pace. While this could lead to breakthroughs that benefit the galaxy's inhabitants, it also carries the risk of escalation. Desperate measures to counter the Tyranids might result in the creation of weapons or technologies with unintended consequences, potentially unleashing new horrors on an already fragile galaxy. The line between salvation and destruction becomes increasingly blurred as factions push the boundaries of their capabilities in a bid to survive. The psychological toll of the Tyranid threat is another significant long-term consequence. The knowledge that the Tyranids are an unstoppable force, driven by an incomprehensible biological imperative, has the potential to erode the morale and resolve of entire civilizations. For many, the realization that the Tyranids cannot be reasoned with or deterred leads to despair and nihilism, undermining the will to resist. This widespread fear and hopelessness could spark societal collapses or radical shifts in ideology as populations grapple with the existential dread of facing an enemy that seeks nothing but total consumption. There is also the possibility that the Tyranids' invasion could have unforeseen benefits for the galaxy in the distant future. While their methods are destructive, their role as a purging force could inadvertently lead to the rejuvenation of certain regions. By stripping away overextended civilizations and collapsing stagnating empires, the Tyranids might create opportunities for new growth and development, albeit at an immense cost. This perspective sees the Tyranids not as an anomaly, but as a necessary force of renewal, a grim reflection of the cyclical nature of life and death on a cosmic scale. If the Tyranids' origin lies in artificial creation, their existence raises troubling ethical and philosophical questions for the galaxy's inhabitants. What responsibility do their creators, if they exist, bear for unleashing such a force? And what lessons can be learned from the consequences of such hubris? These questions may provoke introspection among the galaxy's civilizations, forcing them to confront the dangers of tampering with forces beyond their control. Alternatively, it could drive factions to replicate the Tyranids' methods, seeking to harness their biological power for their own ends, perpetuating a cycle of escalation and destruction. The Tyranids' presence may also force the galaxy to look outward beyond its current borders. The realization that the Tyranids are not native to the Milky Way, but come from the void between galaxies, challenges the assumption that the galaxy's conflicts are the only ones that matter. The possibility that other, even greater threats exist beyond the Tyranids could spur exploration and preparation on an unprecedented scale. This outward expansion might unify the galaxy's inhabitants in a shared mission of discovery and defense, or it could fracture them further as they compete for resources and territory in uncharted regions. Ultimately, the Tyranids represent more than just a biological threat. They are a challenge to the galaxy's fundamental assumptions about life, survival, and the nature of the universe itself. Their origin, purpose, and methods force the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about its own fragility and the limits of its understanding. Whether the galaxy succumbs to the Tyranids or rises to meet their challenge, the impact of their existence will echo across millennia, shaping the course of history in ways that cannot yet be fully understood.